This video is going to discuss now how we divide fractions. In the previous video, we discussed multiplication, and we'll see here how multiplication and division are very similar because they are inverse operations. The only difference is that we have one extra step that we need to complete. If you have two fractions, for instance, a divided by b and c divided by d, if we wanted to divide those two fractions, then what we would do is we would simply multiply by the reciprocal of the second fraction. So instead, we would have a over b times d over c, the reciprocal being the flipped over version of the fraction. And then we just multiply as normal. We would take a times d to get our new numerator and b times c to get our new denominator. So let's try a few examples. In this case, we have 8c squared over 5d cubed, and we are dividing by our second fraction, so we will multiply by the reciprocal. When we multiply by the reciprocal, we end up with 15c cubed over 16d to the fourth when we flip that over. And now we can simplify. The c's and d's don't end up simplifying at all, but we do have 8 divided by 16, which would be 1/2, and 15 divided by 5, which would be 3. So now when we multiply the coefficients, we have 1 times 3 is 3. C squared times c to the third is c to the fifth. In the denominator, 1 times 2 is 2. D cubed and d to the fourth is d to the seventh. And that is our simplified division. Let's try another example. Anytime one or both of the pieces are not written in fraction form, we can always put them in fraction form by putting them over 1. So in this case, we can think of 8c minus 16 over 1 as a single term. So let's rewrite that down here in factored form because these both have an 8 in common. If we factor that out, we are left with c minus 2 in parentheses all over 1 again to keep it as a fraction. Now if we want to flip this one over, the 12 ends up top. And this 3c minus 6, if we factor out a 3 that they have in common, we are left with c minus 2. Now if this is too many steps to do at once, you can do them individually. That's fine. Flip the fraction over first and then worry about factoring. At this point we can simplify a bit. We've got 12 divided by 3, which would be 4, and we have c minus 2 divided by c minus 2, which would be 1. So all we are left with is 8 times 4, which is 32, over the only thing we have left in the denominator is 1. So this simplifies to just be 32, and that is possible for an answer to just be a number. Sometimes we have to factor a little bit more. In this example here, we can do some guess and check, and we can also do AC method here. I'm going to do guess and check just because we have a 3, which is a prime number, and that's a little bit easier to deal with guess and check because we know the only factors are 1 and 3. So now we need to figure out the factors of 10 that will work to our benefit to get that 11 in the middle. And I'm going to try 2x and 5x and make them both positive because all of our terms here are positive. So if we do that, we end up with a 2x and a 15x, which will not give us 11. So let's try that again. Let's try and switch those and see what happens if we have 5x plus 3 and 2x plus 1. And this is really the method of guess and check. We guessed an answer, we checked it, it didn't work, so now we're going to try another one. In this case, we end up with 5x and 6x, which would give us our 11x in the middle. For our denominator, again, I'm going to use guess and check because of the 3x squared being prime. We know we're going to have 3x and x, so now we need to talk about factors of 28 that are going to work. I am going to try 4 and 7, and again, in this case, they would both need to be negative to make the middle term negative and the last term positive. If we do that, we end up with negative 21 and negative 4. So that actually doesn't work because that would give us a negative 25. So I'm going to rearrange the order, make this negative 7 and negative 4. In that case, we end up with negative 12 and negative 7, which would indeed give us our negative 19. Now when we multiply, we need to flip this one over. The 6x squared minus 29x plus 35 will take a little bit more work as far as trying to do guess and check. I'm going to try 3x and 2x. And with regards to 35, we only have 5 and 7. I'm going to try 7 and 5. If I do that, then I end up with 21 and 14, which does not work. And again, both of these need to be negative so that the middle term is negative and the last term is positive. So I'm going to put them in the opposite order, which would be 7 and 5. In that case, we end up with negative 15 and negative 14, which is negative 29. Last term here, I know that we need a negative 5 at the end, so we've got a 5 and a 1. One of them is going to be positive, one of them is going to be negative to get us this negative. And I'm going to try 2x and 2x, again, just to guess. I am going to make this a negative 5 and a positive 1 because that will give me a positive 2x and a negative 10x, which indeed is negative 8x. So now that all of those are factored and we've flipped our second fraction so that we can multiply by the reciprocal, we can go about simplifying. In this case, we have a 2x plus 1 that is going to divide to be 1, a 3x minus 7, which is going to divide to be 1, and a 2x minus 5 that is going to divide to be 1. So in this case, our final answer is 5x plus 3 divided by x minus 4. Now I want you to pause the video at this time, try the next example. You can use either guess and check or the AC method, either way you prefer. Factor these, multiply by the reciprocal of the second fraction, and then simplify your answer and resume the video when you've completed it to check to see that you've done everything correctly. So for this example, I've color-coded them to make sure that you can see where everything came from. The numerator for the first should have factored to be 3m plus 2n, 6m plus 5n. The denominator from the first fraction should have factored to be 2m plus 5n, 3m plus 2n. For the second one, when we flip it over, the denominator is now the numerator, which factors, so this red term factors to be 2m plus 5n times 8m minus 3n, and the old numerator becomes the new denominator, which was 2m minus 3n times 6m plus 5n. So then we can go through and simplify. We have 3m plus 2n divided by itself, which is 1. We have 6m plus 5n divided by itself, which is 1. We have 2m plus 5n divided by itself, which is 1. And these remaining two terms are all we have. 8m minus 3n divided by 2m minus 3n. Again, this is as far as this will simplify. Please do not try to simplify the 3n's or the 8 and the 2. Since these terms are not factored, they are only subtracted, we cannot simplify any further. We have a few more examples. This next one is a little bit trickier, but not too bad. We need to look at our method of factoring by grouping because we have 4 terms here. Now, if we group the first two, we have a 2x in common, and we're left with x plus 5. If you group the second two, they have a y in common, and you're left with x plus 5. So that would end up simplifying to be x plus 5 times the quantity 2x plus y. Our denominator, which was x squared minus 25, is a difference of perfect squares, so that factors to be x plus 5, x minus 5. For our second fraction, our denominator, which is x cubed minus 125, becomes our numerator. And again, when we're factoring a cubic, we use that SOAP formula we talked about. So we take the cube root of x cubed, the cube root of 125, so we get x and 5. Then we look at these two terms. We square the first to get x squared, we multiply them together to get 5x, we square the second to get 25. Then we look at the signs. Originally it was negative, so we've got the same opposite, always positive. And that is how we factor x cubed minus 125. Last, we have our numerator, which is our new denominator. And take a second to look and see if you can see how this one factors. This one actually doesn't factor. You should notice that it matches this x squared plus 5x plus 25, so that will be the piece that it simplifies with. In this case, there are no terms that multiply to be 25 and add to be 5. So now we can go through and simplify. Like I just said, the x squared plus 5x plus 25 is going to divide to be 1. X minus 5 divided by x minus 5 is going to divide to be 1. X plus 5 divided by x plus 5 is going to divide to be 1. And we're going to be left with simply 2x plus y over 1 technically, or you can just write it as 2x plus y. We have one final example here, and this involves multiple steps, which is why I included it. Sometimes it is necessary to do more than one process in a problem. And recall, the order of operations says that parentheses or grouping symbols are always the first thing that we deal with. So we need to deal with what's inside the parentheses here first before we can deal with anything else. So again, to remember your order of operations, it's parentheses or grouping symbol. Exponents, multiplication and division, which are actually the same operation grouped together. Same thing for addition and subtraction. Those two are put together, so they would happen in occurrence from left to right together. So in this case, we need to deal with the grouping symbols first before we deal with multiplication and division. Inside the grouping symbol is actually multiplication. So I'm just going to rewrite the 2x squared minus 9x plus 7 over x squared minus 1 here, and then we'll put divided by, and then we will put our simplified version inside here. So 2x squared plus 9x plus 4. So we're trying to find factors when we know that this has to be 2x and x because those are the only factors of 2x. So we can either try 2 and 2 to multiply to be 4, or we can try 1 and 4. I'm actually going to try 1 and 4 because I know we have to get up to 9, and 2 times 4 is 8, and 1 times x would be 1, so that would give us our 9. So this ends up being 2x plus 1, x plus 4. In our denominator, factors of 3 that add to be 4 are going to be x plus 1, x plus 3, and then we are multiplying here by x plus 3 divided by x plus 4. So we're multiplying here so nothing flips. Now we can simplify. X plus 3 divided by x plus 3 is 1. X plus 4 divided by x plus 4 is 1. And we're left with our 2x plus 1 inside the parentheses. Now we can factor and simplify this first fraction. 2x squared minus 9x plus 7. Again, we know we're going to need a 2x and an x, and the only factors of 7 are 1 and 7. I'm actually going to split them this way, 7 and 1, and make them both negative, because then I will end up with a negative 2x and a negative 7x, which will give me my negative 9x. X squared minus 1 is a difference of perfect squares, so this factors to be x plus 1, x minus 1. Since we are dividing, we just have to flip this fraction over inside, which now becomes x plus 1 over 2x plus 1. Everything else here is simplified to be 1. So now x minus 1 divided by x minus 1, x plus 1 divided by x plus 1, and we are left with 2x minus 7 over 2x plus 1. And this is our final answer. Again, do not try to attempt to divide the 2x and the 2x. They cannot be separated from the -7 up top and the +1 in the denominator. This concludes the video for section 5.5 on multiplication and division of algebraic expressions. Please go on and complete the homework now for this section.